Hi, everybody, and welcome to this special episode of the Dr. Keith Darrow podcast, where today we welcome Alice Cellino. Alice, welcome to the program. Sorry, Dr. Cellino, but welcome to the program. Very excited to have you on because you're quite the unicorn in our field in that you've got a private practice, but you've got audiologists, speech therapists, occupational therapists. You're really providing a very holistic approach to rehabilitation in the hearing, speech, and balance side of things. So thank you for all you do and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So it's like, tell us a little bit about your journey. I mean, look, that's not, you don't find that quite often where somebody who is an audiologist says, I really want to open this big, expansive clinic. Not every private practice owner wants to have, I think you said, over 40 people on payroll and on staff. So tell us, like, how'd you get there?
That's my favorite story. I'm an only child, which I have to preface that by saying, so I got all of the attention of both of my parents. And my mother was an old PhD speech pathologist out of the University of Tennessee. And it's just the privilege of a lifetime plugging. What a wonderful upbringing I had, but specifically working with mom as a mother who was working full time and had a kid. So I got to go and do a ton of stuff with mom in her clinical practice. She started out as a researcher and loved research. She's very much a go-getter, but I think likes to move faster than a lot of times you can in university life. And that just eventually she was like, you know what? I'm going to start a private practice. So she started the practice back in 1977, and I grew up in it. And I grew up when it was appropriate, getting to go do the things like, tag along. And I have one particular memory of being part of every afternoon. A local physician who had a stroke was going through some really intensive rehab with mom. And just watching the progress, and it was okay for me to be there and watching really the amazing story of this incredibly high-powered physician whom we loved regain her life. I mean, all the way through. And that motivated me. And I thought, I really want to do this. I want to be a speech pathologist. And got all the way through and decided, I don't want to do speech pathology. I want to do audiology. It just, like so many audiologist stories, the sister field just suits some better than others. And I loved audiology once I really started studying and loved, in particular, vestibular sciences. And so I joined the practice in 2000 and I don't even know how old I am, 2008, maybe, something like that. And then have been there ever since. And mom has just retired this year. And so I have gotten to work with her clinically as well. I've been managing and running the practice for about a decade now, but I've literally been there my whole life.
That is really impressive. And that's definitely, first off, that's a very familiar story. I too, went and did the PhD route, worked in the lab. I'm a full-time tenured professor, but you're right. It does not move at the speed we want it to. And I even started, I got a grant. I hired an audiologist to work at the university clinic. All these things, but it's like so slow in the university world. And so that was my motivation for going out and starting a private practice and really sort of just branching out, because you're right, it definitely moves slow. But what a cool upbringing. By the way, I don't think there's any HIPAA police, but I do like how you put the caveat of, I was allowed to be there when it was okay. Nobody thinks you and your mom, I don't think, doing anything nefarious or you watching therapy that you shouldn't have been. But so I think it's funny that you say that. So you're now managing this practice, right? I mean, I would just love, go ahead.
Well, there's a level deeper. We are so all in, which is a sign of how much I love the field. And I wouldn't be here and do these things if I didn't love it. And I think there is such hope. I can roll on for that for a long time. But this is how all in we are. I spent the first part of my career trying to wear two hats we do everything in-house. We do our own billing. We do our own, book balancing. I was doing payroll. I do 401k. We did every bit of it. And obviously there's just not enough time in the day to do that and to do clinical development. So about 3 years ago, I stole my husband, who is, he worked for a major financial institute for 25 years. We had a great setup there, and we made a big decision to come on and you run the business side so I can focus on clinical development and guiding the practice clinically. And that was a hard thing because now, not only am I working with my mother, I'm working with my husband. He's one of the 3 guys that we were talking about.
Okay.
And you got to be sure of how much you love it and how able you are to work well with family and people. And it's just a joy. I think it's a good thing.
That's such a cool story. Look, in full transparency, and I've told this story before, my wife worked at the practice. My mother-in-law worked at the practice, and it was great, but it did take its toll. Sometimes I'm not the easiest person to work with, but I think what the real important message there is knowing your limits, right? Especially when you get to a certain point, you cannot wear every hat, or you can try, but you're not going to do it well, right? I mean, you cannot be, right, jack of all trades but master of none is true for a lot of us. And that's a really hard decision to sort of give up that role, because it's something I'm sure that you were used to for so many years. And what has it done for your business? Because a lot of people, especially in private practice, they hold on for dear life to seeing patients, to running the practice, doing the books, doing the insurance, not realizing they're only getting in their own way of growing. So what was that journey like for you once you were able to hand over the reins?
I think that's a great question. I had a lot of support. I have an external board that means the world to me. It's 15 professionals out of Atlanta. None of them have anything to do with the communication disorder field. In fact, they're everything from got a research and development physician who only does research, and all the way to a guy who owns a $500 million manufacturing company. And so and everybody in between. And I really used those folks as a sounding board, and they were the ones, good advice is how we got there. They were the ones to really say, you will not grow and hit your goals. And I don't mean financial goals. I mean the goals of what I want to do, professionally. How am I helping people? How am I responding to the changing landscape that's always in front of you? And so I had good advice, and I think anybody can have that. There's sort of your big cabinet, your board, if you're lucky enough to have one, and if you don't, I would encourage everybody. And then you have your kitchen cabinet, the folks that know you personally and care about you. And good advice from those folks made it easy to let go and say, here's your strength. This is what and I was good at the business side, but my passion's the clinical side. And sometimes it just took the advice of others to say, we see this in you. You need to have confidence and go for it. And it was also very helpful that my husband was the right candidate for the job. Got real lucky in that respect, that because we would have looked outside, but it was outside of the family, of course. But he was he just had
Well, I'm pretty sure if he made it through the interview process and didn't get the job, then there might have been some issues.
We'd have never interviewed him. It had never gotten that far if he wasn't a good candidate.
I love that. But I love what you said. And I hope, because a lot of people in private practice listen to this show. So the most important message there is you can't do it alone. And you don't have to, right? See, I'm a big proponent of, and this is why we have our Aud Experts community. And I'm not trying to promote anything. What we do is we provide that coaching, that advice. I love what you have, which is you've set up a board. It's really not that different than the practices that work with us. Consider us a board, consider us a coach. I mean, look at the greats, right? Whether it's the greats in sports or in business, every one of them will tell you they have a coach. They have a whole support team that sees them through the good times, the bad times, that gives advice. You really can't do it alone. And I swear there's something about our field, and it's probably because we have no business training, that makes us think we have to do it alone, right? We can do it alone and we have to do it alone. And I'm sure you've, in your position, I'm sure you've met many practice owners who've struggled with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And perspective. Perspective is hard to come by when it's all internal, and so that the boards have been an enormous source of support and blessing. And when you go through things that are hard, which every private practice participant will tell you about the hardest HR thing they've been through this week, or the hardest audit that has come up, or all these different things. It's been so helpful and unexpectedly helpful to even have advice from folks who know nothing about audiology. That has still been useful, but how much better would it be? I love what you're saying about an internal field board of support and direction. That's great.
Yeah. And that's another bit of advice, right? The outside perspective. So what a lot of people don't realize, unless you're sort of really in our community or sort of sit by my side or my partner Jared's side, is we've been planning to provide remarkable patient care. We have been prepping our clinics. We have been prepping our community for 10 years before we ever launched our program, before we ever really decided to change the direction of our private practices. We were spending years of research outside the industry. And I always use this example of, so direct to consumer, over the counter, right? People think that's a threat to our industry, right? The same way about 10 years ago, the orthodontic industry thought direct-to-consumer braces, Smile Direct Club, right? And so I remember being in the trenches, going to orthodontist meetings. We actually had an orthodontist as a coach to help us best prepare for what's coming and to help us differentiate ourselves from the widget. So you've got to look inside. There are people in our industry who've done it. I'm sure you would agree. I wouldn't necessarily listen to the manufacturers or people who don't run private practices or never see patients. That always, I always scratch my head at that. But also outside of our industry is a great place to look.
Yeah, I agree. I do.
So let me ask you, you said that this board, this community has helped you reach your goals. What are some of your goals? I mean, like for somebody who's got occupational therapist, speech therapist, audiologist on staff, where are you going? What are some of your goals? If you don't mind sharing.
No, I don't mind. That's a layers deep question. Some of what I feel like they've been hugely helpful with are some of the micro goals. For example, in speech therapy, and it seems to be true across all practices I've talked to, the wait list for therapy is terrible. We need more providers. We just do. And COVID allowed for some real innovation with the virtual therapy. Virtual therapy, when you look at the outcomes, was in the right context and with the right measurements, outcome measures in place, every bit as effective as traditional face-to-face therapy. So some of the micro goals have been, how do I reduce my therapy wait times? I don't want to see 300 patients on a wait list to get in, particularly when you're 3 years old and 6 months is an incredible portion of
that's not acceptable at that age.
It's not, and yet there is no magic in creating providers, and so how do we handle some of those things? So they have been great about setting, or even personal micro goals. For example, we have a 13-year-old and 9-year-old sons that are wonderful, and it's easy in a private practice world because you'll never go home with your desk clean. It's just not going to happen. And so how do you balance that? And anyway,
I'm looking at my desk. It's a mess.
I am in my house because my desk is so messy at my office. That exact answer. But in terms of big, what do we want to do? I live in a community that I love dearly. Columbus, Georgia is about 100 miles southwest of Atlanta, right on the Alabama line. But we're about 100 miles from the nearest big town. And so that's nothing for you and I that, have easy transportation, but it's everything for more than 60% of the patients who, the services in their area are all they're ever going to have. And you got to make the best of what you've got. And so I want to create a place where, I should also go back and say Columbus is relatively small with Fort Benning, our military base, we have about 250,000 people. And so there are the services available in Columbus are wonderful, but we can't necessarily attract some of the things like reading success centers that look at language-based reading issues and really incorporate reading therapy into speech language therapy when it's a language-based deficit. There's not a big center for that here in town. We have an Easter Seals that incorporates all levels of therapy, but there are not many outpatient clinics that really are the places to go when you have a child or an adult with more than just a single discipline's communication needs. And that's what I want to do. I want to bring neuropsychology in. I want to bring physical therapy in. That we'll have to expand our footplate, but one collaborative place where people get the best care across disciplines, or the barriers they have to really staying communicative with their friends and family in school and thriving. So it's a big goal. And sometimes I don't know exactly what the pillars of that goal are, because it changes. The more you learn, the more you venture off and say, ooh, that's a need I didn't even know about. But that's what we want.
Well, and I guess that sort of brings me to one of the things I wanted to discuss today, because in addition to the occupational therapy and the speech therapy, and I would actually, and I hope it's okay to say this, but anybody who wants to learn about a multidiscipline clinic, reach out to Alice, right? I hope that's okay to say. I don't mean to just, make everybody contact you, but it's very rare. And I know this because I know a lot of clinic owners. It's very rare that somebody successfully runs a multi-center approach. Look, a lot of audiologists we want to help everyone. We want to do kids. We want to do this. We want to bring in speech therapy, psychology for the tinnitus patients. We want to do all sorts of things. That's just our big heart. But when it comes down to business, there are bills that have to be paid. There are lights that have to be kept on. And so it's not that easy. And a lot of times with a multi-specialty practice, we either have to say, are we going to cut off this limb so that the rest of the body can grow? Or are we really going to figure out how to do this? And I guess I would love to know more about how have you successfully done it? Because like I said, before you, I've really yet to meet people who are very successful at it.
That's a great question. I don't know that I've ever drilled that answer in my own head. Let me think for a second.
That's okay. Sometimes when you're successful, you don't necessarily understand how.
I think we are unusually good at being collaborators with our physician partners. I think that's been key to so many things. For example, when let's take an example of, a speech pathology patient that we see and it's a typical, well, this one wouldn't be typical, but a young language disorder, or that's the presenting diagnosis, the presenting referral, reason. But then when you get in and you're really looking at that kid and you go, let's test their hearing, and then let's look at, wow, I don't know, the hallmarks there for a potential auditory processing disorder. We need to really talk about that. And so let's talk to mom. And then that opens up, what else are we looking at? And I think that's true for nearly all of our patients, right? I mean, so many people come in with one isolated, it's just this is the only thing that's the only part of their problem is this big. But what we're good at is picking up the phone, and we've done this by earning trust and being all in, right or wrong, the complicated or not, and picking up the phone and calling that physician and saying, this is what I'm seeing. I'd like to do this, or I'd like to do that, or can we talk about this? And it has opened up a trust that we do have the patient's best interest at heart, and that we are looking at them holistically. And that has just fed referral sources, and with referral sources, who we are working with and measuring our outcomes and showing, this is good. This is progress for this patient.
I got to tell you, I'm sorry to cut you off, but if somebody's Sometimes with podcasts, people don't necessarily have the attention span, but that right there was probably one of the single most important things that has ever been said on this show. And Alice, I don't even think you realize how important that was, because every day, another client, another person in this field asks me how to develop a physician marketing program. What do I have to do? And I ask them, well, what do you do? Well, I drop off articles. I bring chocolates. So you're just trying to sell something.
Yeah.
What you just said is the most important thing. Just pick up the phone and establish a relationship with referring physicians. Let them know that you're doing it because you care. Let them know that it's about a patient, not about just, can I get more referrals? What can I just do this? That is so key. And I tell people this, do you really want 30 physicians who refer maybe once a month? Or would you rather have 3 local physicians who refer 10, 15, 20 patients a month? And the only way to do that is to dive a mile deep in the relationship with the referring physician. And you can't dive a mile deep on 30. Maybe just one. Imagine having one referring physician who sent you 10 solid patients who were going to go through with your treatment program, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
I think that was just so critical to anybody looking to expand their practice by, referring physicians.
I had a neat experience to your very point. I love my vestibular patients. At the end of the day, those are the ones that it's just my favorite. And I was at an off-site school event, had nothing to do with work. And a physician friend came up to me and said, and I know this person, and this person refers to me, but they came up and said, that report was so key for me. Thank you so much for the way you write your reports. And I just thought, man, we're not even at work. And he came up, and there's nothing hard to writing the report. I got great advice from my mom years ago. And she said, you need to write reports to whomever referred you. Neurology, ENT, it doesn't matter the level of expertise of your physicians. You don't write it in any kind of condescending way, but you write it in a way that anybody who's reading it can follow what you're saying. Don't assume anything. If you want to talk about why, say things like, the CBEMP and CBEMP suggests this, but VOR looked good here. Spell it out. You don't just write in temp is normal or temp is type A and then expect everybody to know what that means, even folks that are in your field. Spell it out. Middle ear pressure and compliance look great. I'm not worried about anything conductive, and then move on. And a good report is more valuable, in my opinion, than most marketing campaigns because they just roll on.
We are long lost professional soulmates because what we've been preaching is our field has, I'll say unintentionally, but we have belittled ourselves to airbone and speech.
Yep.
Right. Which is why we won't even send the audiogram anymore. Right. You want to call and ask for it. That's great. But it's in our report. Now, how you write a report, I'm sure, is different for everybody. But we've completely reimagined our medical report for 2 reasons. And I've told this story before on the show, wherein my wife during COVID had a breast cancer scare. And the reason I say during COVID is because I couldn't go to the doctor with her. And so I had to rely on my wife to come home while she's in tears, full of anxiety, and tell me the results. Do you think those results are going to be relayed appropriately? Do you actually think your patients can take an audiogram home and explain it to their patients, to their family? No. So we've completely reimagined it. And it was based on the piece of paper that my wife gave me, who just said, look, don't ask me questions. I'm really upset. I'm really worried. Just read this. And I read it, and it was as if I was there. Yeah. I understood everything from diagnosis to follow-up testing to future risk. I mean, everything. And from that moment forward, that's when I took the audiogram, dropped it in the trash, and said, we need to completely reimagine our medical report. And doctors, loved ones, everybody is like, I get it now. I get what you're doing, and I understand the implications of my medical conditions. I know why I need to treat it. I can, I don't think my patients go home anymore and say, oh, they told me it was normal. If they do, it's because they hid the report, right? But I know if they go home to their family and show them an audiogram, it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
But I love what you're saying.
It's been good. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. There's one thing that I wanted to make sure that I talked to you about, which is vestibular rehab, right? I mean, and I don't want to get into the debate of, right, technically the only thing in our scope of practice is vestibular testing, but not rehab. I mean, whatever, nonsense. But talk to me about the new vibrotactile coordinated reset and how you've really been incorporating this into vestibular rehab. I'm gonna be totally honest. I don't know anything about it. I don't do balance. I understand balance. I've taught the classes, but I don't do it on a daily basis.
Well, and I first have to tell you a story. You don't know this, but yesterday you were a huge part of a Parkinson's meeting in Columbus, Georgia. So in the best of ways, let me explain that. So I have a personal Parkinson's story. My mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's 2 years ago. And as all of us probably know in one way or another in our life, when it hits home, you look at it differently. But what it has been a real joy is working with her. It's interesting. She used to teach the Lee Silverman voice therapy for Parkinson's patients. She is the speech pathologist I would ask first about Parkinson's care and as pertains to speech. And so I've tried to become the vestibularologist of Columbus that is best. How are we helping our patients with balance disorders? What are we doing? And there is a whole Parkinson's subset that needs to be evaluated. We need to look at where we are. We need to look at how to keep these people safe and functioning as well as possible. And a great, it's a great joy seeing progress made. You can make progress at any point in your life, and that's a lovely thing. But going back to how you came involved, I'm a facilitator for a local Parkinson's support group. And it's young and fledgling, and we're meeting in the lobby of our office and getting folks interested and involved in those groups. By the way, I'm new to the group, only 3 or 4 meetings, but man, they are useful. They really are. They sharing ideas and working together and just having, patient support is wonderful. But back to you. We wanted to have in specialists, and we wanted to talk about things that are important, for particularly consideration for Parkinson's, and nutrition came up. And we had planned to have a nutritionist in, but back to Columbus being just a small town, we don't necessarily have all the resources that an Atlanta would have, where there are 150 nutritionists to bring in. So when we couldn't get one in for last night, I had planned to use the material that you were very kind and very responsive to send me about, what's your food intake based on keeping your brain healthy, your book, and your research. And they loved it. It was a huge moment of, oh my gosh, there are resources and information out there that I need to be, as the patient, I'm looking at all my sweet friends, I need to be focused on, and man, I can make a difference. And we brought up your research and info about, 40% of this, you have some sort of control over. What are you doing in terms of cognitive health and what you're eating? And if 50% of dopamine is stored in our gut, well, let's keep our gut healthy. And so thank you. I just needed to tell you, thank you for being part of a meeting you didn't even know you were part of.
I didn't even have to travel. I didn't have to leave home. Well, first off, I am honored that came up. And I just love that your advocacy is really not just solely focused on, right? I mean, look, hearing health is important, but we've got to think about the whole person.
Yeah.
And so when you're dealing with Parkinson's, cognitive health is so important. Speech is so important. Are they hearing properly to stimulate the brain? I mean, there's so much that goes into that. And unfortunately, I feel like we were forced in the 90s and the 2000s. It was like everybody's in a silo. Everybody is a specialty. We don't talk to each other. We don't think about the actual person. We only think about the ear or the kidney or the gut or this. And you've got to, and I'm not saying we're going to be experts in all of it, but I do think it's our job to be a resource for our patients. That's a lot of people say to me, Keith, you're an audiologist. What the hell are you doing writing a cookbook?
Oh, I loved it.
Because my patients,
yes,
right? I didn't write it for me. I didn't write it for you. I wrote it for our patients who are trying to live a holistic, better quality of life. They want improved social, emotional, physical, nutritional, cognitive health. We can't ignore these things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I sincerely believe if you want a job for life, you solve or you help solve the problem in front of you. And we all know our patients don't come to us with isolated problems. And some of it is just showing them the resources, but some of it saying things like, oh yeah, if my Parkinson's patient that I'm seeing right now for vestibular studies, talk to me and let me get to know you as a person. And yeah, you need a meeting place so that we can share ideas. Well, actually, I know of a place we can solve the problem in front of you. And you did that with your cookbook, and it was
awesome.
It was
awesome. Great. Well, I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah.
But
back to the VCR.
I was just going to say, before I let you go, we did not close the loop on VCR and what that means. Because, look, here's what we know. We know that people with hearing loss are at a significantly increased risk of falls. Falls are devastating to anyone over the age of 65. If you live through the fall, but you might end up in surgery, it can cost your family $30,000 per incident. So vestibular rehab is really important. We also know people who have fallen have increased risk of cognitive decline, right? And so it all really does come together. So I want to know more about this VCR, what it is, and how you incorporate it.
VCR is vibrotactile coordinated reset, and it's brand new. And when I say that, brand new in the sense of this certainly has not made its way down to me clinically. And I think in your stratosphere of research, I think it's pretty new across the neurology board. There's a guy, there are several, obviously multiple researchers, but out of Stanford, Peter Tass, has just published, and it is, the first publications are coming out for Parkinson's, but my interest in, and I have that Parkinson's interest, no doubt about that. But clinically, I think there could be an incredible correlation with vestibular patients, particularly the patients like 3PD patients, or we see a lot of Malda debarkment around here because we're close to cruising the Gulf. I mean, close enough that I see it, and I really do see it. But effectively, vibrotactile coordinated reset therapy is tactical stimulation through the fingertips using 250 hertz bone vibrators, tactors. I mean, this is incredible how it ties into the audiology field, really, that it resets neuronal firing patterns. For instance, in Parkinson's is the everything's firing all at once, and that's part of how we get some of those motor coordinate, the motor issues. And this is the stimulation is through your hands at alternating intervals. There's all kinds of patterns with it, but the initial reports coming out on the efficacy of this will blow your mind. I mean, wow. Google Peter Tass. He has one. His first subject was a man who had early onset Parkinson's, maybe in his 40s or so, and had been diagnosed maybe 10 or 11 years ago. And so by the time Tass got to him, he was in bad shape. And, so incredibly ataxic, just all the issues. And after, I think it's 2 weeks, you just have to watch the video. His recovery of motor function will make you cry. And as you watch that, and as you're trying to understand what is VCR, and my gosh, how can it have so many audiological connections? Where are we helping with this research? Are we a part of this? What about the balance patients we have that may not be in that narrow lane of Parkinson's, but we have all got vestibular patients that we don't know quite what's happening, meaning it's just fuzzy. It's fuzzy. But would they benefit in a non-invasive approach? Let's beat down the doors and let's get some studies going. And so that's really my interest. I would love to be a clinical site where we're studying this.
I mean, that's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating and absolutely necessary.
Oh, yeah.
Right. It's, and not just for the Parkinson's patients. I mean, if I had to guesstimate, 70% of our clientele, and I work mostly with adults, will make some remark about balance issues. And it's not always just vertigo.
No.
Right. There's more to it. There's more to balance than just, is the room spinning, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel lightheaded? Do you feel unsteady? And, I do a little experiment with my undergraduate students. I tell them to just put foam earplugs in for a few hours. And what is it like, to have a mild conductive hearing loss? And 9 out of 10 in their report will talk about feeling off balance, about not having that sense of comfort in the auditory world around them. And they never thought of it. And I don't think most of us even realize that it goes beyond just the vertigo, right? Yeah. There's so much more to the role of hearing in balance and coordination. And I love the idea of having readily available, non-invasive therapy to help these patients, because it's about quality of life. Absolutely.
I think it's time that we step into the stream rather than just waiting for it. And I don't, and I think there's a remarkable opportunity. I love what you brought up about what's our scope of practice. I know those are, as you know, those are the things that get thrown around, but I also see every day patients just sent to us in our community where the physician partners are saying, can you help? And if we're trying to solve whatever the problems are in front of us, what if this is a solution? What if this is a real avenue for making a difference in our realm, in our scope of practice? We need to get busy showing our interest, saying, I'm here, send me. I want to be a part of this.
I'll leave it at this. And I think that I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with me on this one. When you go through all the regulations, if you look up ASHA, if you spend the time researching, within our code of ethics, it clearly states that our job is to hold the welfare of each patient paramount. That, to me, overrides the scope of practice. Mm. And so I wasn't waiting around for some scope of practice document to tell me that I should be doing cognitive screenings. I wasn't going to wait around for the scope of practice to tell me that, and they're still not even there, cognitive rehabilitation, which we're doing in our practice, right? Our job is to hold the welfare of each patient paramount. Now, if I provide any services, any rehabilitation, whatever it may be, it must be evidence-based. Right. Because that's also in the code of ethics. And so that, I think, 100% trumps, we talked about how the university system moves slow. Well, so too do these regulatory agencies move just as slow, if not slower. And meanwhile, our patients are suffering and need our help. And if we are skilled and there's evidence-based data for it, we got to do what's right.
I totally agree. And see it differently now that somebody I love so dearly. I don't want to wait for what is around the bend. If I can get to it now, give it to me now. And so I agree.
Alice, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for everything you do. What a great, I think, a great episode for those that are not only interested in how to successfully run a multi-service clinic, multi-specialty clinic, but just for anybody who runs a practice, for anybody who truly wants to go above and beyond for every patient. So thank you for all the information today, and thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, and thanks for being so easy to talk to and taking my call.
No, absolutely. Last question. What's your favorite movie?
Ooh.
We got to learn something personal about you. I mean, you've been personal today, but something outside the box.
I mean, it's Goonies.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The Goonies.
The Goonies. My wife's favorite. My wife's favorite movie, hands down, of all time.
It's so good. It's so good.
I love it. Alice, thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.